Hi, Misha here. This is one half of kind of a two-part video looking at support craft used by Starfleet, the Federation. In the other half, I looked at kind of the repair cargo, 2 tugs and 2 work bee types. And in this half, I'm going to look at more of passenger transports. I have, again, 3 from the shuttle packs and 1 from the major series. Over here, we have the so-called executive shuttle. Here, we have the so-called travel pod. Probably the most famous of these, frankly. Here, we have the air tram. The one that actually may not be space worthy, I'm not sure. And then we have the one from the standard collection, the Sydney class, USS Jenolan, which, as you notice, is a larger version of this one over here. Well, let's start with, like I said, probably the most famous, the transport pod. This was a orbital craft that could go, well, from a planet's surface to a space dock or starship, or it could go from a space dock to a starship, which seems to be its primary use. It docks to a standard docking port, like those we saw on the Enterprise refit and Enterprise A. The little docking ports next to the bridge and also next to the torpedo bays on the gooseneck. These also, of course, can interface with other ships from that era, like the Miranda class, the Reliant. It's not especially large. It has 1 pilot and it can hold 7 others. Seems to be about 4.5 meters long, but again, this is a short range, limited time. Basically, it's kind of like the transports we get in the airports, those little electric automated trains. So it doesn't have any amenities. It's just, there and back. I mean, it doesn't even have impulse. It's just thrusters. But it's to be used when transporters aren't an option. It can also be used as like an inspection pod, if checking over work and stuff. But just a little specialist pod. Kind of akin to it, the air tram. However, we first see this in the motion picture as it docks. And we also see it in Star Trek 2 and 4, which is kind of stock reuse, but it does the job. This, too, we first see in the motion picture. We see it on Earth, transporting Kirk around North America. It might even be a civilian craft. It's called an air tram. It's basically what they consider like an anti-gravity train. It's definitely bigger than the pod. It's 12 meters. So a bit under 3 times the length. Meaning it can probably carry at least a couple of dozen people, maybe up to 3 dozen, and it has 1 pilot. Again, a very specialized craft, and either orbital or maybe even just suborbital, who knows. But just a ground conveyance. This is called, at least to some, the Executive Shuttle. It is one of the largest shuttles we see. It's about 26 meters. Again, we don't know how many it can carry, but if the air tram can carry 24, 25 to 30, this being more than twice the length, really realistic, you could probably carry 50, 60, maybe even 70. We first see this in Star Trek VI. But then we also see it in Star Trek Generations. It lands on the saucer of the Enterprise and is rescuing people. We know that these were carried on Nebula-class ships, or could be. We also know that at least 2 of them could be carried on an Excelsior class. So even though it's large, it's still small enough to operate from at least some shuttle base. And again, that's really all we know. Like most of these, it's just kind of there to give a sense of scale and space travel and depth to the universe. And of course, related to it, the Sydney. This is an upscaled version with warp nacelles. In my notes I have it's basically the Boeing 757 of the Star Trek universe. This is a warp long-range transport, basically a huge shuttle. It is an official starship though. We see at least 2 of this class. The USS Jenolan crashed, and the USS Nash in Deep Space Nine. It's at least 230 meters long, so multiple decks. It does have a bridge module. It seems like most of the command, the actual starship stuff, is focused on the bridge module, leading the lower decks to be for passengers, and this could carry at least 200 and probably more, plus cargo. And it's definitely not a conventional starship because we don't have a saucer section. So it's not your typical starship, and of course it doesn't have any real combat capabilities, any exploration. This is a passenger ship, which obviously Starfleet, Star Trek, the Federation in general would definitely have. Possibly also could be a colony ship. But yeah, it just gets people from point A to point B and can transport a large number in probably reasonable comfort. So yeah, what about the models themselves? Well, obviously, in the real world, this came first. And to make this for the episode Relics in Next Generation, they flipped that model upside down and added a bridge module and TMP era nacelles to it, which is a good kit bash. This was still done back when they had to do that, before CGI was a thing, but it worked well. And this is called the Sydney class of ship. The Executive Shuttle is definitely not a Sydney class. It's way too small. But, you know, there can be a design lineage. Why not? Since they both are doing things. This one would transport a smaller number of people. If that's a Boeing 757, this could be a Boeing 707 or 27. Shorter range, probably inside a star system. I don't think it's warp capable, but it probably does have full impulse, meaning it could get anywhere in the Sol system relatively quickly, at least with the inner planets. And for longer range voyages, much like when you go to larger aircraft, you have this. It works. As far as the models, I think me, like a lot of people, love the Genolan. It's just cool. It's one of the ones that very few, if any, other companies have done, giving Eaglemoss kind of an edge here with it. It's the main body and everything is metal, with of course the nacelles being plastic and part of the outer kind of sticky on bits being the plastic, but it's actually quite large for what it is, and it's got some pretty good weight to it. The little shuttle here even is made from a higher proportion of metal. The whole inner core is metal, with of course the little winglets being plastic. One nice thing about this one, it's one of the few where and it uses a standard shuttle stand, but because of its nature it actually slots in between nicely, and it's one of the few shuttles that actually stays on its stand well, which I greatly appreciate. The Genolan is fine. It's a little loose, but it's back mounted. It's not going to come off by accident. The air tram, very long, good size. Interestingly, the top is metal. It's the bottom on this one that's plastic. By the way they construct these, it almost always has to be one or the other, at least if it has thickness to it. If it's a thinner model, they can get away with one piece. Not a lot to say about it. It's a very plain model. It's probably, I mean, it's fine. I'm glad that enough they did it, but it's just not that interesting, and I could have lived without it, frankly. But since these come in packs of 4, it's an all or nothing proposition. The transport pod is much the same. The bottom is the metal, which is nice, meaning it sits on its stand well. And then the top and the docking ring are the plastic. It's neat enough. I mean, I'm glad they did this one. It's iconic enough, and you see enough of it in the movies. It would be kind of a glaring omission from the shuttle sets. It's of a good size. It's probably about 1/72 scale. Maybe a little smaller, maybe closer to 1/87, but because if it's a relatively small craft, it scales pretty well. So I would definitely say of the shuttles, the Executive is the neatest. And just because you can sit it next to your USS Genolan and show the clever usage of props. But it's also neat because the Executive shuttle was in the movie Generations during the rescue operation. It was painted blue, but same model of shuttle. But yeah, I know, like I said, this isn't the most interesting content, but again, as I said with the other half, it's having ships like this that really flush out the universe. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope I got some of this on the camera. Did my best. I appreciate you sticking with me. If you could, like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to, please check out some of my other videos. Well, it's late, guys, so I'm going to call it a night, and I will catch you very soon next time.